Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, so have you ever felt like international relations are just this like giant game of chess, countries making moves, and we're all just trying to keep up?
Yeah.
Well, buckle up because today we are diving deep into China's relationships with the U.S. and the USSR during the Cold War. Talk about a strategic balancing act.
Yeah.
We're talking shifting alliances, ideological clashes, all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Some seriously high-stakes diplomacy from 1949 to 1979.
It's a fascinating period for sure. You see China go from comrades in arms with the Soviets to shaking hands with Nixon.
Wild.
Yeah. And I mean, to really grasp what's going on in global politics, even today, you have to understand what drove them during this time.
Absolutely. So let's rewind back to 1949, Mao Zedong, Communist Revolution, success.
Big time.
China's basically this newly formed power on the block. They're trying to find their place in a world that's already doing the whole Cold War thing.
Right.
So where do they turn?
Well, I mean, the obvious choice at the time, the USSR.
Yeah.
The leaders of the communist bloc under Stalin
Makes sense.
and China's communist revolution. Huge win for their side. Plus, let's be real, China desperately needed help to rebuild. Economically, militarily, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's where the 1950 Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance comes in.
It sounds intense just saying the name.
It's a mouthful.
What did this treaty actually mean for both sides?
Basically, it made them BFFs, at least on paper. Soviets promised economic aid, military support, shared technology, like a welcome to the club kind of thing.
The communist starter pack.
Exactly. And on the surface, it made sense. Shared ideology, common enemies, you know the drill. Seemed like a no-brainer.
Right, totally. But as we all know, things are never that simple.
Never.
Especially in international relations.
Especially with these guys.
Yeah.
1953, Stalin dies. Khrushchev takes the reins and wants to get this peaceful coexistence with the West.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Mao was not about that life.
Yeah, that's like the opposite of what Mao was all about.
Totally different styles.
Mao was all about the revolutions, spreading the communist love, and Khrushchev's over here talking about being buddies with the West.
Right.
Probably felt like a slap in the face.
Oh, for sure.
How did that go over? How'd that ideological clash actually play out?
Things got frosty. Mao saw it as a straight-up betrayal.
Right.
Like Khrushchev's diluting the revolution, abandoning the cause.
Right.
And this wasn't just them bickering over tea. This was a fundamental difference in how they saw communism's role in the world, you know? And that had some very real consequences.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about the 1969 Sino-Soviet border conflict, right?
Yeah.
It escalated quickly.
Yeah, from debates to actual border skirmishes. But this wasn't just about some strip of land. It showed just how wide the gap between China and the Soviets had become.
Right. It's easy to think, oh, shared ideology, they'll be best buds forever.
Nope.
But as John Lewis Gaddis, the Cold War historian, points out, sometimes national interests and who's got the bigger stick matters more than ideology.
100%.
Yeah.
Gaddis nailed it when he said that this whole China-Soviet split, it wasn't just a regional spat. It was a seismic shift in the Cold War.
Huge.
Weakened the Soviet Union, gave the West an opening, especially the U.S.
So we've got China stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
The Soviets not exactly friends anymore. And then there's the U.S. I'm guessing things weren't exactly peachy across the Pacific either.
Not really. Early on, it was pretty hostile, especially with the Korean War kicking off in 1950.
Oh, yeah. U.S. backing South Korea, China backing North Korea. What could go wrong?
Exactly. But like I said before, things in international relations, they change.
Right.
What looks like a solid alliance one day could be ancient history the next. And, well, get ready because things are about to get interesting.
So China's basically playing relationship roulette here.
Right.
Soviets on one side, not exactly sending holiday cards anymore.
Nope.
And on the other side, the U.S. still not exactly best buddies.
No, not at all. The Vietnam War really threw a wrench in things.
Yeah.
Put a strain on U.S.-Soviet relations, yeah, but it also got China thinking.
Right. Makes sense. They see the U.S. getting bogged down in Vietnam, and they're like, hold on, maybe this is our chance.
Exactly. A chance to break out of their corner, make some moves on the world stage.
Okay, strategic thinking, I get it. But how do you go from enemies to even thinking about being partners with the U.S.? That's a big jump.
It was a process, for sure. A lot of backroom deals, secret meetings, that whole cloak and dagger stuff. But one thing that really stands out is Kissinger's secret trip to China in 1971.
Oh, yeah. This is like the stuff of spy movies.
Yeah.
Kissinger, right, the U.S. National Security Advisor, just pops over to Beijing to meet with Zhu Enlai, the premier. Like, It was nothing.
It was huge. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, the U.S. and China actually talking at that level, it was unheard of.
Right. What was the reaction? Did people lose their minds?
Pretty much. It was a major shakeup. Everyone scrambling to figure out what it means. It was the first real crack in the Cold War ice.
And that paved the way for Nixon's visit in '72.
Exactly.
That image of Nixon shaking hands with Mao is iconic.
Totally. One for the history books.
Yeah.
And it completely changed the game, drove a wedge between the Soviets and China, which, the U.S. wasn't exactly mad about.
Weakened the Soviets, right?
Big time. And it opened up a whole new world of possibilities for both the U.S. and China, new economic ties, strategic partnerships, you name it. Gaddis called it the start of triangular diplomacy. U.S., China, Soviet Union, all trying to outmaneuver each other.
It's wild how fast things changed. A couple years ago, China's in the Soviet camp. Now they're making deals with the U.S. Makes you realize that in international relations, the only constant is change.
For sure. And it's on us to try to understand the why, the motivations, the historical context. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of random events.
Right. Like Nixon going to China. Easy to see it as a given now, but it was the result of a ton of factors coming together.
Exactly. So, speaking of different ways of seeing things, when historians look back on all this, how do they interpret China's motives? We talked about Gaddis, but are there other schools of thought out there?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are a bunch of different takes on China's whole Cold War playbook.
It's like Historiography 101. It's
Yeah.
not just what happened, it's how we make sense of it, right?
Right, totally. Like everyone's got their own spin. So break it down for us. What are the main schools of thought?
Well, you've got the Orthodox view. They'd tell you that China was basically reacting to the Soviets being the big bad wolf.
Okay, so China's playing defense.
Exactly. The U.S. is just a convenient counterweight. Then there's the Revisionists. They flip the script.
Oh, here we go.
They say the U.S. was being sneaky, using China to get ahead in the big game.
So it's all a power grab.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then you've got the post-revisionists. They're like the middle ground.
Keeping it real.
Gaddis was in this camp. They're saying both the U.S. and China were being pragmatic.
Yeah.
No heroes, no villains, just everyone looking out for number one.
Right. It's always more complicated than it seems.
Exactly. And then there's the new Cold War historians.
Yeah.
Chen Jian is a big name there.
Okay, what's their take?
They say, we've been missing a big piece of the puzzle, Mao himself. His personality, his own agenda within China, it all mattered more than we thought.
So it's not just about China versus the world, it's about what's happening inside China, too.
Exactly. Power struggles, internal politics, it all plays into how China acted on the world stage.
Man, it's like layers upon layers. Makes you realize you can't just look at international relations in a vacuum. Got to factor in everything going on domestically, too.
100%. And that's what makes this whole period so fascinating to unpack.
Absolutely. But to really get a grip on it all, it helps to zoom in on some key moments.
Right, like signposts along the way.
Exactly. So hit me with those historical turning points. So let's get into it. What were some of those big moments that shaped China's Cold War experience?
Well, you got to start with the Korean War.
Right,
Nice.
1950 to 53.
Major turning point.
Yeah.
Really cemented that rivalry between the U.S. and China.
Totally. And it brought China and the Soviet Union closer, at least for a while.
Exactly. Common enemy and all that. But then things get interesting with a great leap forward in the late 50s, early 60s.
Right. Mao's big plan to supercharge China's industry didn't go so well, did it?
Not really. Ambitious? Absolutely. Successful? Not so much. Led to some serious problems. Widespread famine, economic hardship, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, one of the worst famines in history. Really tragic.
It really was. And it put a strain on their relationship with the Soviets.
Because the Soviets weren't fans of Mao's approach.
They were critical, yeah. They even pulled back their support, which didn't help things. Remember those ideological differences we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
This just added fuel to that fire.
Right. And then, boom, 1969, the Sino-Soviet border conflict. Things get real.
No more just talking tough. Actual military clashes, border skirmishes. The friendship was officially over.
Wow. So by 1969, China's in a tough spot. Soviets, out. U.S., still not on the friend list. Talk about a strategic pickle. And this is where Nixon's visit in '72 comes in, like a plot twist in a movie. Nobody expected that.
Totally out of left field. Suddenly, the U.S. and China are talking, and the world is freaking out. Do they just become best buds? What's the game plan here?
Everyone trying to decode the message. And then just a few years later, the Soviets invade Afghanistan in '79. How did that impact this whole China-US thing?
Well, it gets even more interesting. China actually sides with the U.S. in condemning the invasion.
Whoa, really?
Yep, they even provided some low-key support to the Afghan resistance. It showed the world that they were done playing second fiddle to the Soviets.
They were making their own moves.
Exactly. They'd learned to play the game their own way, and they were a force to be reckoned with.
From following the rules to writing their own. What a journey.
It really is a fascinating period in history, and it reminds us that international relations are rarely about fixed sides or permanent friendships. It's all about navigating the complexities, seizing opportunities, and ultimately looking out for your own interests.
It's about playing the long game, making those strategic moves, and sometimes making some pretty unexpected alliances along the way. It's a good lesson for anyone trying to understand the world today because those same forces are still at play.
100%.
It's all about understanding those motivations, the historical context, the different perspectives. It's complex, but it's also what makes studying history so fascinating.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Big thanks to you for breaking it all down for us.
Anytime. It's been fun.
And thanks to everyone listening for joining us on this deep dive into China's Cold War balancing act. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.